The next thing I want to focus on is community resources, and we've started talking a lot about that in dribs and drabs throughout our discussions during the Learning Network meetings. But I want to focus a little bit today on how to look at that internally. And this will especially get us back to when I started to say we need to know what our real needs are. When we look at what community assets are out there, and we look at some of the asset mapping strategies that we're encouraged to do by the asset mapping gods, we frequently and quickly realize are overwhelming. I map the community, and I take 2 years off to map the community because there is so much. That's the good news. There really is so much. We have never been in a community, and I mentioned that the name of our organization is Help for Nonprofits and Tribes. We have been in tribal communities that the entire tribal population is 250 people. There are assets in that community. They're a tiny little place, and there are assets in the community. So the good news is when we start to think, if I were to map this whole community, I'd be here all month, is okay, there's a lot. So what we need to know is, for our organization's purpose, what are our real needs? There is a handout on page 9 that just gives you some of the idea of that, because what we're really looking at is how do we share resources. And Gwen and Myron were talking about the perfect example, that they're sharing space. Let me start this discussion by giving you a concrete example. I mentioned that the history of Help for Nonprofits and Tribes really has birthed what we're calling the Community-Driven Institute. We're trying to put these methodologies together and create a training institute that teaches these. Well, there's another side to our lives. And that side to our lives is that Dimitri and I have founded 2 small organizations. The first in Tucson, the second we replicated up here in the Valley, and those are the diaper banks. And in creating the diaper banks, we had started the first diaper bank in Tucson as a cute little thing for us to do at holiday time to give back to the community. Just like babies, it outgrew cute very quickly. And what we had learned is all of the things, as we did this diaper drive year after year after year, we learned all of the things that you in the room know instinctively. That diapers are not covered by any of the safety net programs, that they're tremendously expensive, that if you are making minimum wage and taking home $800 a month, you cannot afford the $100 a month for diapers, that a lack of diapers leads to child abuse because a baby in the same diaper for 3 and 4 days at a time can only cry, and that the same translates to the elderly end of the spectrum, that there are issues with folks with disabilities who can't get supplies so they can't live independently, all the stories you guys know. At the end of 5 years of doing diaper drives, what started out in our first year as collecting 20,000 diapers led to, in year 5, our collecting 300,000 diapers. And they were all in our 800 square foot consulting office. It was pleasant. We at that point realized that the way we had gotten those 300,000 diapers is we had also taken 6 months off of work to do so. Not intentionally, but you wind up, we could do this in the schools. And we could do some stuff with employers, and you did a great job, and 2 things happened simultaneously. We realized that those 300,000 diapers were a drop in the bucket in terms of what was really needed in the community, and we realized we were about to go out of business. So we looked around and we said, okay, let's build a diaper bank, because it has to be able to outlast us. We preach to our clients that you need to create systems so they're not dependent on you as the founder. And here, if something happened to us, we could just as easily decide, no, we're going back to work, no more diaper drive. So we needed to create something that would live beyond just us. And we looked around the country to quickly realize that we were about to build the first and only diaper bank in the country. We now think it may have been the first in the world, because we get calls from all over Canada, Australia, saying, how do we do this? So it's sort of comforting and discomforting to know that diapers aren't covered anywhere, which is we don't need to go there. My little diaper politics. So all of this is happening. We're trying to decide how do we build a diaper bank when none has ever been built before. And it's a little bit different than the food bank model because food has to come in and out pretty quickly because much of it is perishable. And we had a whole lot of history of how we had sort of done it and how we've been thinking about it. Diapers can sit on a loading dock for months. They're not going to go anywhere. They're not going to go bad. So we started to look at how do we build this diaper bank. This was at the same time as we were having our nonprofit epiphany. This was at the same time as we were realizing there's got to be better ways to do things. So we were very fortunate in having our own little baby to practice on. We had our own little nonprofit that we come up with these great ideas and we try it. And we tweak something else and we would try it. So we had our clients we could work with. We had you guys are probably doing that right now. you know, when you're starting something new and you get to apply. I know that you guys have done a lot of that over at Ask, is how do we apply it? We try something new. And so we were very, very fortunate as we were developing these things. Here's how we wound up building the diaper bank in Tucson. And then when we realized we were getting so much calls for demand for this across the state and across the country, that is actually how we initially met St. Luke's Health Initiatives, because you guys were funders of ours. St. Luke's provided us with the funding, just like they have been innovative in their thinking now to say, what will it take to build resilience? They funded our saying, will it work to replicate this elsewhere? Which was very forward-thinking and very exciting. And we replicated that model up here in the Valley, and that's what brought about the Valley's Diaper Bank. Let me show you how we did this, because it's all based on that concept of sharing resources and looking at that chart and that sense of what are our real needs and looking out and saying, what are the community's assets that could meet those needs? We went down the list and we said, every single function the diaper bank has to do, let's list them. And we used a checklist very similar to the one that's in the handout. What do we need in terms of personnel and why? What are those roles? What do they really need to do? What do we need in terms of facilities? What do we need in terms of equipment? What do we need in terms of regulatory issues? Because we weren't a 501c3, we were a consulting firm that was doing a cute little diaper drive. So we listed out all the functions we needed to do. And we said, if somebody in the community is already doing a piece of that function, let's partner with them. So let me share with you what some of those bubbles looked like. One of the things that we started to list out was, well, we're going to need caseworkers. And we're consultants. We're not social workers, and we started going into a sweat. I don't know how many caseworkers. This is a new commodity that's never been available before, so we don't even know how many people are going to walk in the door. And started to get really nervous about how do you screen, how do you hire caseworkers? I don't know. We finally realized that we had been giving the diapers to agencies, and that for a couple of reasons we should continue to partner with those agencies. And one became resoundingly clear, and it was not necessarily, just like you see that there's side benefit out of all of this when you build on assets. Yes, it would save us money. We would obviously not have to hire caseworkers. We would not have to go outside our area of expertise and figure out what it meant to hire caseworkers. But the most important thing became very, very obvious to us very quickly. The system already screens people 972 more times than they need to be screened. For every single thing they want to do, the system already puts them through another screening process. We didn't want to be that. We wanted to go with folks who were already screening them. People frequently ask us, how do you decide who gets the diapers and who doesn't? And we say, we don't. You guys are already screening them. You figure out who gets the diapers and who doesn't. The other thing that we found very quickly is if people need diapers, they need other things. And we very, very quickly found what you guys are probably finding is a hot button in your particular organization. We quickly found that people who were not getting help, whether they were too proud, whether there was a language barrier, people who were not getting help and were outside the system when it came to diapers for their babies, they called. And we were able to triage them and get them to folks who could more appropriately help them. So what originally started as our cold sweat over hiring caseworkers became a huge mission asset in that we could provide better service for them by getting them to someplace that could actually help them. And yes, by the way, it saved money. So it was one resource we didn't have to develop. One of the other, and you know, I can't even start to go into all of them. One of the things that we knew we were going to need to be is we were going to need to be a 501c3. We were going to need to build a board. And we started on a process that I'll talk a little bit more about when we get into human assets. But we started on a process that we call community sleuthing. And community sleuthing is really just going out, doing your homework, and finding out what is going on out in the community. And it's really being a sleuth. It's really asking questions. And so as we were starting to build the diaper bank, we went out and started to talk to people. You've heard of the diaper bank. What do you think about how we should build it? And what do you know about the demand? And are there things we're not thinking about? Are there places we should be talking? Are there folks we should be talking to and places we should be looking at? And one of the folks that we talked to said, you know who you need to be talking to? You need to talk to Carondelet Health Networks. Carondelet has 2 hospitals in the Tucson area and 1 in Nogales, and a huge system of a network of healthcare provision, including social work. And so we went to talk to the folks at Carondelet and Carondelet Foundation. And by the time we left their office, they had offered to be our 501c3, to be our board, and they said, you know, we're a huge healthcare foundation. Your tiny little budget is going to be a drop in the bucket for us. Let us get you started. And so they were the fiscal sponsor for the diaper bank. They were the 501c3. They set up a separate bank account under their EIN number, but a separate bank account so that the checks would come into us. We'd log them so we knew who the donors were, and then we would give them to Carondelet and they would deposit them. It went through their audit. It went through their, we didn't have to spend our early days building a board of directors and figuring out what is, I mean, we know how to build boards of directors and it was still going to be a lot of work. But this was a way that we could share. In this particular instance, it cost us nothing. Because they said, this furthers our healthcare mission, and this is our connecting with the community. But again, it has to do with that interconnectedness. So that was a huge help for us. After about 3 years, we realized we're ready. We're fine, we got the bugs worked out operationally, okay, we're ready. We made the application to the IRS, we started to build a board. But having this as a nest to grow out of it was comforting. And it was also comforting because you got that side benefit of all the expertise of a wonderful healthcare organization that you could bat ideas around with. So again, this was a community asset we had never even thought about. When we did the needs assessment after raising 300,000 diapers, Tucson alone was going to need 2 million diapers a year. We needed to find a place to store them, someplace that was obviously a warehouse with racks and forklifts. We were going to need an experienced warehouse person. This was going to need to be sorted by size so that when the agencies came to get them, if they needed preemies, they didn't get size large adult diapers. In the olden days when we first would collect the diapers, when we were first doing the diaper drive, we would get a room full and we'd say, good, you, agency, that's your room. We don't know what's in there, use them well. That's a lot easier when it's your cute little philanthropic thing you're giving back to the community than when you're actually doing this and it's your mission. So we were going to need to store, sort, and distribute $2 million diapers every year to agencies that came through the doors looking for those. We started thinking about the food bank. You think about all the logical players, food bank, Salvation Army, who would have a warehouse? And somebody said, put an RFP out to everyone, to all the nonprofits in the community, because you never know who has what. It was just like when we started talking about physical resources. We never know who has what unless we start asking. Well, this was in the days before email, when we did a broadcast fax. United Way did a broadcast fax for us. And we did an RFP, and we said, if you have some extra space and some part-time personnel, don't ask me how much 2 million diapers is going to be in room, because I don't know. But if you think you can accommodate maybe a quarter of that at a time, and you have some part-time personnel that you can devote to once a week distributing diapers, give us a bid. And if you are going to consider going out and figuring out what the market rates are, don't bother, because I can do that, and I can just go out and pay those. So what we had figured out from the rent, the utilities, the insurance, the experienced warehouse person alone, the amortizing out the costs of a forklift and racks, is we figured it was going to cost us between $40,000 and $60,000 a year. Just the warehouse person alone was probably going to cost us a bundle. We wound up getting bids as low as $6,000. A counseling office had a 2,000 square foot garage in the back that they said, you know what, we're not really using it for anything. And it really was that you never know who's got what. You never know who's got what. The group that we wound up going with is an organization. They used to be known as Tetra, and they were here in the Valley. I don't know if they're still here. But they've merged with Beacon Foundation in the Tucson area. And they're now totally under the Beacon umbrella. And what Beacon does is they provide vocational training to folks with disabilities. And they use the diapers as training for the developmentally disabled in warehousing skills. Doesn't it? I've been telling this story since 1999 and I still get, isn't that cool? So, you know, you've got 20-foot ceilings, you can drop diapers and nothing happens to them. It's an accident-proof product. And yet the synergy, many of their clients actually were using our diapers because they needed them to come to work. Because you wind up with a wonderful mission synergy, a wonderful story that when we would go out and tell people, you know, funders want to hear that kind of story because you've got real, this is not collaboration on paper. This is real synergy at the core. It also cost us $15,000 a year because it was part of their mission, it was part of our mission, and it was under a contract. The interesting thing as we start talking about all of these different ways of tapping into the community, and you talk about interconnectedness, every single party to building the diaper bank feels it's their diaper bank. And so while all we have is a contract with these guys, because literally they've been under contract now every year for Scott, since the diaper bank, so is that 6 years? Oh, wow. I'm tired. So are you all still? We are not. We actually resigned from the board, retired, I should say, from the board last September. We took a long time to founder-proof the organization, to hire an executive director and download everything we could to her, and to then build a board that understood how to govern. And we very intentionally took a very long time to make sure that when this baby grew up and left home, it wasn't coming back. It's one of those founder issues.
I didn't think you could do that.
We're gonna find out. We're gonna find out. Yeah, considering now both of us have kids that are in the college age and 20s age, we're gonna see if it really works. It worked for an organization, it's gotta work for our kids. We're all going, no, you're not. You just don't know. But yeah, in answer to the question, we are actually, as of September, just as a quick aside, we hired an assistant the other day who's going to start in a couple of weeks, and Dimitri looked at her and said, do you realize you are the first employee we will ever have had since 1993 who will never touch a package of diapers unless it's your own? So she's like our version employee. She's never been near diapers. It's very exciting, very exciting. One of the other interesting things that came up, in our first year of doing the diaper drive, we raised 20,000 diapers from the community. We had a wonderful radio partner who sat in front of our office who thought it was weird and funky to ask people to drop diapers by on their way to work, and they wound up being a fabulous partner from years on. They're still the radio partner for the diaper drive. But the 20,000 that we raised in that first year and thought this is very cool, we would have schools now that raise 20,000 diapers in their diaper drive, wow, which is amazing. They challenge each other. We'd give prizes of pizza parties and get other folks involved. Well, the question then becomes, how do you get those 20,000 diapers to the warehouse? And here's a pop quiz for you guys. How many diapers can you fit in a Toyota Camry? Because I actually know that.
Not nearly enough.
It's not nearly enough is the correct answer. Yeah, you can fit 2,500 diapers in a Toyota Camry, which means that if you can, I can even tell you, my pickup truck, my little pickup truck can fit 5,000, and a Suburban can fit 7,500, which means that even if you've got Suburbans, you're making free trips. And we started to think the same questions you guys come up with, which is, do you have to get insurance for your volunteers? And you start thinking about well, we put a call out through our networks, through our contacts, through the folks that we knew, and said, we're looking for volunteers with trucks. And what we found is that volunteers with trucks work during the week. So when the warehouse was open and the schools were open, we couldn't find anybody. So you wind up back in that place. Here's what we did find though. A plumbing company called us and said, you know what, we're running around town all day long. Let us pick up diapers. A courier service called us and said, we're running around town all day long. Let us pick up diapers. And then there was the one year where, you guys know in the supermarkets, there's those circulars like the auto and the for rent and all of those free, well, there's actually, somebody has to deliver those there. And they've got this big step van, and they called us and said, not only do we have lots of room in the truck and we're running around all the time, but we've got a dispatcher. So it's dumb for the schools to call you and you to call us, give the schools our number, the dispatcher will just send somebody out, and during the entire month of diaper drive, we never saw the diapers. They went right from the schools to the warehouse, and we never had to worry about it. So when we look at community resources, once you start looking at your real needs, what do you really need functionally? And you look at that graph, not really a graph, but that chart on page 9, that looks at, and these are just some of the functions, you may wind up with others, but they're just a good start for brainstorming. Then you can start doing a very small asset map. Who's got this? And get outside of your head in terms of, it has to be a nonprofit and they have to be doing, because the trucking companies sure weren't nonprofits.
How did they know that you needed that?
We put out word, and we were very, very blessed to have, we used the next group of assets, which is our human resources. One of the human resources that we identified pretty quickly was a radio station is not just a mouthpiece. And it's been fun for us it's been fun for us to work with the radio station so closely. They were trying to hire somebody, it's just as an aside, they were trying to hire somebody at some point, and we're having a devil of a time finding somebody, and suddenly it occurred to them, wow, you know what? We've got a radio station. We could put the word out. We get so stuck in our heads. Talk about not knowing your assets. We're wow, we could actually talking to the mic and tell people we need people. What we realized they also had was a sales department that did nothing but talk to businesses all day. And so we talked to the sales office and said, who do you know that would be likely that's running around people? And so some of it came from that. Some of it came from they were our donors and we put it in our wish list. Yeah. Some of it came from folks calling and asking, I do X, what can I do? How can I help? And we all get those calls all the time. I really love you guys. Is there something I can do besides write a check? They do. They want to give their time. Sometimes it's folks who are apologetic that I can only give you $25. I love you guys. I wish I could do more. Okay, what do you got?
Just briefly, that's true, because we did the VITA program this year. This is our first voluntary income tax assistance for people who may not know that acronym. But as people came in, they wanted to know, we don't have a lot, obviously they don't have a lot of money because they're going through this program. What can we do? And Myron and I had put together a survey and, kind of walked through with some of them. he and I and some of the other people who volunteered don't speak Spanish. Well, in the area that we're in, 35th Avenue in Canton, you know, we get a flood of, you know, Spanish-speaking individuals. So first thing I asked, will you be our interpreter? We're volunteers, you know, you want to get back to the community. That was one of the questions I put on our survey. Will you give back to the community, and what do you have to give? And many of them said, I don't have anything. I said, oh, yes, you do. You have something that I need. You know.
You got something, I want it.
You know, and seriously, we were able to get about 3 or 4 people, you know, at least to say, next year, you know, put me on your volunteer team to be an interpreter. You can start now, but.
And that's so much of what Jody Kretzman was talking about when he was here back in November, is identifying that folks are not just clients with needs, but that they're human beings with gifts. And it is drawing those gifts out of them. I loved the question that he used, because we all have that same thing. I don't have anything. You know, what talents do you have? I don't, you know.
We're taught to be modest.
And we're taught to be modest. And Jody, the question that Jody asked was, what do other people say you're good at? I loved that. Because that's, well, people say I can cook.
And that's one of the things they say.
Yes.
I say I can cook.
Yeah, great. I think the first question, Elizabeth, becomes asking, becomes really thinking outside of, we'll have to get volunteers, and starting to think about, you know, who else is out there doing this, so I don't have to do it. Yeah.
I guess, I just wanted to say one thing, because it is all connected in what I was thinking in terms of all of our bigger mission, that getting individuals that don't traditionally volunteer to volunteer helps them, especially with depression and isolation and all of those types of things that, again, are circular in terms of helping yourself and then helping others.
You really start to see that when you look at the world from this way, that yes, we can build sustainability, but we're building so much more than that. And that it is not that image of the organization is strong versus how do we battle that. It all becomes sort of part of what we're trying to accomplish. The bottom line from the perspective of the diaper bank, just to talk about how this all came together, is in the middle. For the first 4 years or so, maybe 5, of running the diaper bank, this organization didn't quite collect their 2 million diapers. They ran about 1 million diapers a year out of that warehouse to 70 different partner agencies, with one executive director coordinating all of this. The one piece that we knew that we could do that nobody else had clearly demonstrated they could do was collect diapers. And so that really became the core of what the diaper bank office was about, was get somebody in there that can really collect the diapers, let the systems do everything else. And between all of these systems, the fees for this, the salary for the executive director, in those first few years, those 1 million diapers were distributed for a budget of $75,000 a year. So from the fiscal side, whoa, that's pretty cool. And that's why when we talk about what are your real needs, we didn't need money. We didn't know how much money we needed until we figured everything else out. But what I said before, every single one of these entities thinks they own the diaper. When the warehouse is running low on a size, they don't call and say, hey, you know there's no size 6s. They call and say, we're out of size 6, what are we going to do? It's not their diapers, they're on a contract. But to them, it's we. The radio station, we've gotten to the point where the radio station is so owning the diaper drive that we have met many, many people in Tucson that when they say, oh, you started the diaper bank, do you do that for the radio station? Okay. Okay. You know, and that's wonderful. That's wonderful. That's what you want. You want everybody to feel like they own it. Because that's how it doesn't go away. That's how it doesn't go away. Do you guys see how you can apply this in your own work as you're thinking about it? Yes, it's easy to do when you're first starting something, but it's also, especially as we get more and more thinking about how tight funding has gotten from traditional sources, and the words increase in competition, and there are so many more nonprofits, and decrease in federal funds, and from the traditional way of thinking, it tempts us to start thinking, okay, when it comes budget time, let's take a little bit of extra time and think, what do we really need, and how can we find that in the community? I know that you guys right now have done a really good job of that in terms of UMC and sharing space, and that it's and that actually you've had a wonderful opportunity come up as you've been leaving one place, and another opportunity came up to go someplace else in terms of sharing space. What's cool about this is once you start thinking like this, because you can tell from what I'm talking about, none of this is hard. It just changes if you go like that with your head. Once you start thinking like this, you see everything like this. You really do. Everybody becomes a potential collaborating partner. One of the things when we're really talking about this in full and generating discussion about collaboration, that same look I got on you guys' faces when I asked you to name somebody that's always thinking of themselves is frequently what I get when I say, let's think about collaboration. Because some people have had really good collaborative experiences, and a lot of people like put up hex signs and tell me to go away. You know, we've had this myth that we can force collaboration in a competitive process. And those two words don't go together. But this is collaboration at the core. This is collaboration at, nobody has to ask who our partners are. we once filled out one of those online grants, and it said, how many partners do you have? And I put 30,000, and there was no room. So. Oops.